Welcome to the Axsys WebExpress video for tool libraries. I'm Bob Delisle, one of the application engineers here at Axsys. Today, I will go over a few ways to create and manage tools, tool assemblies, and tool libraries in Mastercam. So let's get started. Before we get into actually working inside of Mastercam, I want to talk about the way that you bring in tools. So I've got a very simple job here. I've got my mill loaded. And if I look at this, I've got several tools that I'm going to have to define. I've got to cut these two pockets. I've got the holes on the outside. I've got some holes on the back side. And the way that a lot of people will program this is we'll call up a tool path, say contour. We'll select our geometry. We'll say okay. And then they go grab a tool. And in this case, I already have a tool loaded, but in most cases, you're not going to. So you say select library tool and go through the steps of loading a tool. It takes about, if I had to guess, and you get pretty good at it, it takes anywhere from 10 to 15 seconds to load the speed, to load the tool, to load the speeds and feeds of said tool. So if you think about that, and I think about 15 seconds per tool, and let's just say I've got 10 tools per job. This job, I've got a few less, but on average, let's say 10 tools. That's 150 seconds that I spent. And let's just say I do 20 parts a week. That's 1,500 seconds. And if I take that and multiply that out over a year, it's 43 hours. 43 hours I've spent defining speeds and feeds and bringing in tools that I can do ahead of time, so it takes 1 or 2 seconds to bring those tools in. What does those 43 hours mean? That vacation that you can never take because you don't have time. Boom, there you go. The new toolpath you want to experiment using. There you go. All the day-to-day stress that you guys deal with because you're so starved for time. There you go. Extra week of profit a year for your company. There you go. All by using and leveraging what you already have. All that being said, I said 10 tools per job, 20 jobs a week. That's 200 tools. And if you look at it like, oh, I got to go define 200 tools, that's going to take forever. And it will take some time. You're absolutely right. But we don't have to do it all at once. We can do it as we go. So I'm going to show you some of the ways we can define tools, bring tools in, grab tools from different venues, and get this started, this process started. That's what a lot of people have a tendency not to do. I'll get to it later. But you're programming anyway, so why not incorporate it into your programming? So after 10, 12, 5, 20 jobs, you'll have your tool libraries full. So as I said, I got the part file open. I've got my mill loaded. So I've got the tool manager. If you're running a lathe and that lathe has milling capabilities, you're going to have both tool managers available to you. We're going to be talking about the mill tool manager today. I'm going to open the tool manager up. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this. This is the way that the tool manager is set up, to where my part file are up here at the top, and whatever tool library I'm using and whatever tools are in that tool library are in the bottom rectangle. And the way that this is managed is, we've got 3 icons right here in the middle. One of them is create a new tool library, one is open, and one is import. Select file for tool import. If you have a job that was very similar to the one that I have on the screen now, and you already have the tools loaded for that job, you can go grab that and it will import the tools into a new tool library that you can then put in your part file. But I'm using the mill-inch tool library that everybody should have in your Mastercam install. Obviously, if you're working in metric, you're going to use the mill metric tool library. But there's several hundred tools in here. Am I ever going to use them all? I doubt it. But that tool library notwithstanding, I can right-click up in my part file and I can actually create a tool. So if I know I'm going to use a 1/2-inch tool, I can say create. I'm going to create a bull end mill. I'm going to put all my information in here for cutting diameter, overall length, cutting length, corner radius, shoulder length, shank diameter, shoulder diameter. Get all that information correct. Go to next. Now I'm going to apply my feed rate, my feed per tooth, my surface feet. I'm going to put all this information in. Why is this important to put this information in? Well, I'll show you. I'm going to leave it just as it sits right now. I'm going to give it a name. Call it custom name. I can put a description in here. I can actually put the tools manufacturer's code in here if I'm responsible for ordering tooling. And I know I just used the last one. I can do that. And we'll say finish. I now have a tool in this part file. This information only lives in this part file. So I'm going to say okay to that. I'm going to go back to my tool pathing here. We're going to select dynamic. I'm going to give it a machining region. I'll say okay to that. While I'm here, I'm going to show you guys there's some extra when you're working with solids and with wireframe. If you have solids selected, that was the edge. I also have this feature called cavities. So if I unselect that, and if I select cavities and select this face, notice it selects all the cavities in that face. So if I wanted to take this 1/2-inch end mill and machine all of these areas, I just did it in one click. But I'm just going to pick that edge. We'll say okay to that. Say okay to that. I'm going to go into my tool, and there's my tool. My speeds and feeds are the speeds and feeds that are defined in that tool. They're incorrect. So what happens a lot of times is all of the speeds and feeds in our tool libraries are incorrect. We need to go in and set them. So I need to come in here and manually take that 15 or 10 seconds, whatever it takes, and put all of my information in. I don't have a holder associated with this. We'll talk about that in a minute. Leave all my cut parameters the same, and my depth cuts will make that 1-inch. Make my entry motion 200, and we'll let that rip. And if you take a look at my toolpath, I forgot to do something. Right as I said, let it rip, I realized I forgot to say, stay inside. So there's my toolpath, cuts the pocket. Nothing wrong with it. Now I got my speeds and feeds correct. Let's just say I want to use this same cutter to cut one of these holes. And I'm going to use contour for that. Or let's go ahead and use the same toolpath. Select my machining region. We'll say okay to that. We'll say okay. Now, because I've only got the one tool defined, it's already defined. But what happens if I just come over here and I'm a little OCD. I like to click on my tools to make sure that they are in fact highlighted. My speeds and feeds change. The reason the speeds and feeds change is because the speeds and feeds that I put in there are not tied to that tool. They were tied to that program. That's inefficient, right? So how do we go about adding speeds and feeds to our tooling? I can right click this, edit this tool, and put my speeds and feeds in here. So I think that might be a little fast. How about 650? 4th out per tooth. It is a 4 flute. It gives me the correct feed rate now. My plunge rate I can change. My retract rate I can change. I can put all of this information in and say finish. And now this tool in this part, those speeds and feeds are going to be correct. So every time I use it, I don't have to worry about reverting back. That doesn't do anything to my tool library. The tool that's in my tool library lives in the tool library. This tool's not there. How do I get this into the tool library so the next time I do a part and I call up custom name, it's going to be correct? Well, I just put it in my tool library, highlight it, hit the little black arrow, and it puts it into my tool library. Easy peasy. The one thing that I didn't do is put a holder in, right? So this is in my tool library. This tool is just that. It's just a tool. Well, if I right click and say edit holder, there's my default holder that's inside of Mastercam. I've got some options here. I can create a holder. I can come in here and say, yep, it's a Cat 40. And it gives me the machine connection, which is this. And then this information in red is down here. It's basically my first segment. And I can add segments. I can define those segments by changing some of these numbers. Call that 0.5. I think you get the gist, right? We can define a holder manually. I mean, if I have a holder in my hand, I don't know the manufacturer number. I don't have any CAD information. I can take some mics and define a holder by hand. Some of the other ways, I can import custom geometry from a level. I don't have any custom geometry on a level yet, but we can do that. We can also send this geometry to a level to be used later. Or we can import custom geometry from a file. I'm going to select that one. Inside of my tool libraries folder, I've got a step file. And if I click on that step file and say open, there's a holder. It's a shrink fit holder for a 1/2 inch. Well, how did I get that? How did I get that step file? I'll show you that in a minute. You can create this geometry. Right? So I could create the wireframe and then create a revolved solid, save that as a step file, and then import this in, but I didn't do that in this case. But this is the one that I'm going to use. So I'm going to say next. I'm going to call this special 500 underscore shrink. I could put a description in here. Again, manufacturer's name and catalog ID. If there's through the coolant, say finish. Now, if you look at my tool, there's actually a holder name. And one of the things that I didn't do is edit the assembly name. So now I'm actually going to name the assembly, and the assembly is comprised of my tool and the holder. So we'll call it special 1. The tool name is custom name. My holder is special shrink. Say okay. So now I've got that tool defined completely. Let's take a look at some of the other options that I have in my right click when I select that tool. I can edit the tool. I can edit the holder. Edit projection. If I select edit projection, it takes me back to my part file, and there's my tool as it exists. And if I'm going to use this to go to the bottom of the block, I just take the tool, put it down at the bottom anywhere, click the left mouse button, and when I come up here to my holder, I get a little scale, and I can drag this up and down. Now, I'm limited. I can go down as far as the shoulder definition, and I can go up the total length of my cutter. Obviously, I can't hold it like this. If you develop some way to hold a cutter sticking out 100%, please let me know. But I know this block to be 2 inches. It's got to be, clearance is clearance, right? So if I put in 2.025, hit enter, it snaps that holder to 2 inches, 25 thousandths from the bottom of my cutter. Once I'm done, I can hit escape or enter, and it takes me back. Some of the other options I have here, I can delete the tools. Obviously, I can delete unused tools. I can arrange the tools and view them. I can copy the tools in case I want to copy this tool because I want one sticking out 2 inches and I want another one that only sticking out 1 inch because that's as far as it has to stick out. So I could copy it and then go to edit projection and change that. I could save these tools to library. Then I've got this import export tool. and I can import tool data from. We've got two options here, the Cora Plus tool library and the machining cloud. The Cora Plus tool library and machining cloud are virtually the same thing. The difference is the Cora Plus tool library is just Sandvig tooling. They have their own machining cloud. And then the machining cloud is a software that you can download. It's free. And it grabs the page, it opens up, and you can see it says, welcome, Bob Delisle. You set that up. Over here to the right, if I click on this, it shows me all of the manufacturers in the tooling cloud. The last three that I used were Walter, Fullerton, and Ishkar. But you can see there's an extensive list. This updates, I would probably say 3-4 times a year, maybe a little bit more often. But there's my Walter. That's what I'm looking for. So I can come in here and say search by product family. Grab my milling, solid carbide, so on and so forth. This is like an online catalog. And once I've found the information that I want, I could set it up in a job. I could go to my job management. Inside of job management, it's got all my different jobs. Open this job, you can see it's got the job name, what the material is, what machine I'm using it on. A tool list if I have one, and you can see I've got a couple here. So what I've done is gone in and I've grabbed some end mills, the end mill that I want, the holder that I have associated with that end mill, and I've created a tool. And if I click on tool number 6 there, options at the top light up, and export is one of them. And when I click on export, I can click on Mastercam. It's going to export a zip file to wherever I want it. In my case, I'm going to put it in my tool libraries folder. It's called tool 6. Go ahead and save that. Let's reopen my Mastercam file. Let's go back into the tool manager here. Right click, import export, import from machining cloud. There's tool number 6. I'm going to say open. Select that tool, and before I can put it in my part file, I need to validate it. So I'm going to validate it, and it puts a green check mark by everything. And now I'm going to say save. And I can save this to my part file, which I'm going to do, or you can save it directly to a tool library. Say save to part. Shut this down. And you can see I now have tool 6 here. If I say edit this tool, it's got the imported tool information as well as shoulder length, diameter, length of cut. It's got a surface feet and a feet per tooth that I'm going to tell you that aren't correct. So I'm going to go ahead and set that. The machining cloud does not import correct speeds and feeds. And we could spend 10 workshops talking about speeds and feeds and the correct speeds and feeds. There is no correct number. I can't give you the magic bullet. Every machine is different. Every holder is different. Every tool is going to be different. But I'm going to go in here and set these to somewhat more accurate numbers. Say finish. I can edit my holder same way. So there's the holder. So I can come in here and I can change these numbers. But that's just another tool in the tool belt to grab this CAD data that's available to you for free and bring it into Mastercam. I'm going to backplot this toolpath I have here. And I'm willing to bet that some of you guys are like, I program for the same machine every single day. I do the same types of jobs every day. I rarely have to be concerned about this holder because I'm cutting 2 inches deep. I know my cutter's sticking out 2 1/4. It's far enough. As long as I pick it up right, I'm good to go. That's if you program the same machine and the same type of parts. If one day you get a quote in, it's a little bit more complex part. And I got to spend more time actually out at the machine, looking at the geometry. How far has this cutter got to stick out? Well, I'm really not sure. Now, there's some things inside of Mastercam that we can do. But defining the holder and the cutter and the projection of that tool is one of the first things that we need to do to make sure that the machine doesn't crash. And I'm going to show you a brief example of what I'm talking about. This is a executable file that I pulled off of a machine simulation. And this is on a Haas UMC 750. See, I've got my cutter here and I've got the part. And the tool path that we're going to show is the deburr tool path. It's going to go in and deburr all the edges of this part, including the edges down in there. So I'm going to turn my speed down just a skosh, and we'll go ahead and run it. So without even moving any forward, you can already see the value of having this tool and this tool holder defined accurately. Well, the value really comes in is once I get down into some of these pockets. Even something as simple as that. It's very important that we define this accurately once we start getting into more complex parts, and especially if you get into 5-axis. Today, you may not have a 5-axis, but because I'm going to have this defined and I'm going to save myself that week, there could be opportunities for new jobs, new types of jobs, a new machine. And it is ultra important to have your tool defined accurately when you're talking about multi-axis and continuous 5-axis tool paths. Go ahead and shut that down. So we talked about going from here to here. We can also go from here to here. So if I take this 1/4-inch spot drill that I have defined, I can simply click on it, grab it, put it up into my part file, and I have this ready to go. You can do that with all of the tools if you know ahead of time what tools you're going to be using. But this is a standard library. This is my custom stuff, the stuff that I've defined that I'm going to want to keep moving forward. So this is just one job. I've defined 3 tools. I've either created those tools manually, I've imported them from the cloud, or I've taken them from this tool library and made them my own or customized them. So I'm going to actually create a new tool library. We'll call it TL_043020. Today's date. Say save. Notice my tool library is empty. It's because they just created it. So I'm going to grab these tools and put them in my custom tool library. Now, there was a lot of talking associated with that process. If I would have just done this process without all the blabbing, it would have taken just a couple minutes. And I've got now 3 tools that I can use moving forward. Just shows you that it doesn't take as long as you may think. The task isn't as daunting as you may think to create proper tools, proper stick out for all of your cutting needs. Now, if we take a look at this 1/2-inch bullnose, you probably use 3 different iterations of the same tool, one short, one normal, one long. So that would be 3 of those tools that you have to create. That's okay. We'll create them as we need them. If you have the ability to take, let's just say I'm going to go in Saturday and it's slow, but they want me to come in, or I am the boss and I want to come in and develop a tool library. I come in on a Saturday, I can do this all at once. I can spend a few hours and create custom tool libraries. Don't look at it, the task, as such a daunting task that you never get started. Take that first step, and it is so important, and it's going to be so helpful moving down the road. So let's say yes to this. Like I said, I just saved my first custom tool library. The The tooling cloud, again, is something that you can go on a Google and search, and it's fairly fast download, and there are literally thousands of tools and holders. So if you know something specific, if you have a job coming up, you can go into the tooling cloud, define your job, put all the tools you need for that job in there, import them to Mastercam, and when you start that job, right click and say import tools, import all of those tools, and now you're ready to go. Make some fine adjustments to speeds and feeds, grab those and put them in your tool library. One of the other accesses that we have in your install, when you install Mastercam, in your start menu, under your Mastercam, there's a tab that says Tool Manager. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And it opened up my second screen, so let me drag it where it needs to go. Shut Mastercam off. See, don't save. The nice thing about the Tool Manager is this Tool Manager runs outside of Mastercam. So let's say we've got 5 seats of Mastercam at the shop, and it is that Saturday where I want to come in and define a tool library, but everybody else is using Mastercam and there isn't any seats available to me. Well, I can't open up a part file to define that tool library. Well, I can open up the Tool Manager. I'm not using a license, and we'll just open up that mill-inch tool database, and it takes just a second, because in the mill tool database you can see I've got 2 assemblies, 921 holders, and 428 cutting tools. And if I click on cutting tools, it gives me the list of my cutting tools. The same thing for holders. So I can come in here and I can say, hey, I want to create a new assembly. It opens up this assembly tree down here, and I'm going to go to my holders. I'm going to open it up. I'm just going to grab one. Sure, we'll grab that one. And I can drag it and drop down into my assembly tree. It does a couple things. One, it gives my assembly a name, same as my holder. I can come over here and change that information if I'd like. I can give it a tool number here, but I've got my holder. Let's go grab a tool. Let's grab that. We'll drag it down, and I've just made my first assembly. There we go. This is the 3/4 countersink 82 degree. I can change that name, save that into this tool library if I want. Or one of the other things that I can do, now that I have that, I can say, you know what? Open up my special library. I'm just going to open up another instance of Tool Manager. So there's my assemblies that we just created today. This assembly is in this other tool library. I can simply drag and drop it. Let's hope it made it. There we go. I can drag and drop that into my custom tool library. So I could spend all day working in this Tool Manager outside of Mastercam, not using the license, creating tools, defining. I can create tools. I can create accelerated finishing tools. I can create holders. I can create assemblies, and then drag and drop them into my whatever tool library that they belong into. It's just another way that we can create tools. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. Please feel free to contact us with any questions or comments, and have a great day.